topics. Shaun, first, can you introduce yourself? Who am I? That is where I usually start when I talk about entrepreneurship. And where are you going to? Those are the two most important questions.
Thanks, Prof. So, interestingly, this year is my 20th anniversary from graduating. Can you believe it?
Wow,
and
it's quite a while back.
It's been a while. And clearly, you can see I got my MBA when I was probably 15 at that point. So we'll just leave it at that. But so my name is Shaun Fuchs. I am a teacher. I'm a history teacher. That's really what I've been my entire life. But with this absolute dedication and commitment to education. And that took me through various roles, and I clearly remember 23 years ago, enrolling at BSN, and I was the only teacher. At that point, I was a deputy principal, and everyone around me was bankers, engineers, finance, and I can't remember, there was one or two others in the auto industry. So, but it was very unusual to have a teacher coming on and doing an MBA. I'd kind of then moved through the ranks of going through. I headed up school. I was in the AdvoTech group for 17 years. I headed up Crawford College, Lone Hill as principal headmaster for a number of years, and then left that to go into the corporate side of managing schools, which was probably the worst part of my entire career in the corporate sector. And I think I'm relatively vocal about that in the book. I don't think, but certainly as an entrepreneur, there were many lessons I learned from the corporate side, and they really were the school fees I needed to pay in order to ultimately open my own school. So I'd headed up as general manager of Crawford Schools for a bit. I then took over the Centennial group, which AdvoTech at that point, I think it paid about 800 million for. There were 3 schools, and then I was headhunted to take over the Redham House group in South Africa, been taken over in 2013 by Inspired Schools, and I was managing director of that for 4 years. And then got to the point where I decided to step down and open my own school. And I think there was changes that needed to happen, and it was the perfect storm because COVID hit us in, as we know, in March 2020. And that's when I started putting together the ideas of the school. So yeah, that's really, you know, my I always see myself as a teacher more than anything else, and with a couple of extra things along the way.
I'm quite sure that starting up your own school, it wasn't about seeking a job. It was a certain passion you have. Could you tell us a little bit more about that point of, is it no return to the old, wanting something new?
Yeah, absolutely. It was my frustration in the education system is that our education system is completely outdated. So parents are paying an astronomical amount of money in South Africa for private education, because in many aspects, state education is dysfunctional. And we're all teaching from the same curriculum, the CAPS curriculum. And the curriculum was designed in the late 90s. So in the late 90s, if you go back to the late 90s, we didn't even have smartphones. So we have a curriculum that is preparing our students for a future that happened 30 years ago. And what I needed to do was look at what can we do to create something that is way more relevant than the current education system. And I always talk about I always bring history into it. You talk about life-changing events, and you take the comparison of World War II. So in September 1939, Hitler invades Poland and World War II breaks out. by August 1945, Japan surrenders, World War II is over. You could never go back to September 1939. The world had changed completely. So from engineering, from business, from politics, how people interacted, everything. We had a similar thing. We had COVID. So from January 2020 to January 2022, the world changed completely. How we shopped, how we socialized, how businesses operated. So things changed completely and accelerated in most parts. What was fascinating was that when schools opened again in January 2022, they went straight back to doing what they were doing in January 2020. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. And it was the most perfect opportunity to change things. So for me, on the back end of that and with that vision in mind, was about creating Centennial Schools as a forward-focused school. The challenge you have, of course, is the Education Act stipulates that you have to follow a recognized curriculum. I understand the logic. Unfortunately, there's no leeway in that. So the curriculum is CAPS. The curriculum is Cambridge, which is a waste of time in South Africa. I think parents waste their money sending their kids for Cambridge education, 13 years to get a matric as opposed to 12. The South African education matric, or Umalusi accredited matric, will get you into any university in the world. So Cambridge is not going to help your kid anymore or any less in getting into university, and actually complicates things in South Africa. So I didn't look at Cambridge as an option. And the international baccalaureate is dollar-based. So I'd probably have 2 or 3 parents. I mean, it's just not affordable. So CAPS was the route to go, with the understanding that we would try and manipulate it, or we would manipulate it as much as we can to offer a modern education on top of offering additional subjects and how we teach. So the critical part was we had to change the pedagogy, the method of teaching. And in order to do that, we had to change the physical space. And that's exactly what we started doing.
Right. I thought we need to talk about education, because I very much agree with you that our educational system is failing. We're not teaching our kids the skills, and even now, even more. Even after COVID, we have another big change coming in terms of the geopolitical issues that has changed the world and the outlook on business. So, what is your thoughts about the education of the future, and then maybe touch on the technology side of things, and how do you see artificial intelligence playing a role in the education of the future? I think it's such an important thing. And then maybe too about your reference to play, the importance of play, which is what was it? Einstein said, about play is the highest form of research. So how do you do it? How do you go about? How did you change things?
So the first thing that I needed to set about was we changing the pedagogy, right? So how are teachers going to teach? Critical. In order to do that, and this is where schools go wrong, you have to change the physical space. So you cannot do an 8x8 or 8 by whatever, literally 8x6 square meter classroom, desks beautifully in a row, and then we have a teacher in the front and teacher centered, and the teacher's going to teach. That's not what we did. So what I did is we created what we call learning hubs, much bigger in space, mobile furniture that can move around into small groups, into a big circle, into groups of 4, individual rows. And the teacher plans the setup of the physical learning hub based on the type of lesson they're going to teach. So if I'm having a collaborative English lesson, then I'm going to be able to put them into groups of 2 or 3 or 4. And of course, we know collaboration is one of the biggest skills that we need in today's times. I want to say modern times, but it's in today's times. The problem, of course, is schools hate collaboration. So anyone listening to this will remember when you had group work at school. It was always that group in the corner, keep quiet, or I'm kicking you out, or there's too much noise, or schools are not designed for collaboration. So automatically, we're not teaching that skill because we prefer for our students to work individually. It's easier to manage, it's more calmer, and it makes more sense in an old outdated system. So designing the learning hubs around collaboration, around the fact that the teacher becomes the master learner and the student becomes the apprentice learner. So what I mean by that, teacher desk removed from the classroom, taken out. Why? Everyone here, if you've got kids at school, ask them this evening when you get home, say to them, or if you remember your own schooling, go into the classroom, teacher teaches the concept. So I'm teaching a concept, introduction. Students make notes. When I finish, they're going to do an activity. So they start working on independently or on their own. And what does the teacher do? 100% of the time, the teacher goes to his or her desk, sits down, totally disengages from the students, and the students do whatever they want. So I've taught for 10, 15 minutes. The balance of the lesson, there's zero communication. If a student wants to learn anything or is not sure of something, they literally need to get up and go to the teacher. Now, as you start moving into adolescence, that's not going to happen because do my friends think I'm stupid? Am I slipping the teacher or what? There's so many issues that go in those teenage brains. So kids don't do it. So we took the teacher desk out. It meant that teachers moved to the different venues. So you don't have students wasting time running around the campus. They stay in their venues. In senior grade 10, 11, 12, teachers and students move around. And it means that once I've taught, I now start walking around, facilitating, asking questions, checking the work. Every single one of our students works off laptops. But at the same time, they also make notes. So there's because we know, the research showed us, purely typing, brain becomes passive. Writing, frontal lobe cortex becomes more active. So we balance the two there. But now the teacher's walking around, assisting, engaging, participating in the lesson. So this is briefly how we start changing the pedagogy of how we teach, that it becomes a collaborative lesson. It becomes a lesson of exploration. So the teacher's not only the bearer of news. If I want any one of my students to understand something or to learn something, the first thing they're going to do, they used to go to Google, they now go to ChatGPT, or Gemini or Claude, so it's completely different now. But they can get any amount of knowledge that they want, any amount. The current education system is still saying, I need to give you the knowledge. And that makes no sense in a modern society. So we certainly went about changing that pedagogy, still having to teach the curriculum, if that makes sense. Added to that, we brought in entrepreneurship, but here's the critical part, and it would be interesting to hear your comments on this as well, Prof, is my argument is entrepreneurship as a subject in school is a waste of time. What you need to do is you need to provide the skills behind entrepreneurship, literally in the DNA of your school. So it means when I fail, how do I succeed? How do I stand up? What do I need to do to succeed the next time? Because in entrepreneurship, you fail. You fail a lot before you succeed. Elon Musk, SpaceX, did not succeed in its first flight, or second, or third, or fourth, and I can go on. But now successful, it's that instinct. So the instinct that is around entrepreneurship is in the DNA of the school. The other part of bringing entrepreneurship as a subject, you often have a teacher who has no concept of being an entrepreneur, trying to teach a subject. It makes no sense. So what we do is we create the environment on entrepreneurship where students, we run programs like Next Gen Founders, which we based on Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, where students bring in ideas. We've just had an article now in Business Community, have just published a wonderful article about that, where our winner last year was a grade 7 boy, Eric, and he took over his mom's business and he's brought in, and it's critical sustainability. And what starts happening, you're appoint a mentor and you start mentoring that person. So the entrepreneurship is not a subject in the school, but we start teaching them. And because the school is such a high-tech environment where every single student has a laptop, we gamify it. So now, if you've got kids, I will tell you now, you're fighting with them to keep them out of that PlayStation or Xbox or playing, because that's the nature. They are digital natives. This is just who they are. So what we did is we took that and we said, how can we use gamification to teach? How can we use gamification as a part of learning? And so we partner with a Canadian organization called Go Venture, and we have a game of entrepreneurship. And they start in grade 8, and they start with a simple lemonade stand. And that little lemonade stand is, they've got to design a name. They've got to brand it. They've got to, they start with $100, starting with operating capital. What do I do? How many stands do I make? How many people do I employ? The type of product I'm going to sell. Lots of sugar, my costs are higher. My profit's lower. I need to sell volume. Or where do I locate it? At the beach, at the park, at the mall. So all those business decisions they start making. That's where entrepreneurship starts. You're embedding the skill set for them to start thinking like entrepreneurs. And it doesn't mean that they're all going to become the next Elon Musk or whoever it is that you aspire to be as an entrepreneur. It means that a student going to become a doctor, just a GP, thinks differently. Their cognitive pattern thinks differently because they have a skill set that's enabled them to think entrepreneurially. And, if you go to your GP, most GPs are probably the worst entrepreneurs ever. The successful GPs who are entrepreneurs have got hospitals, have got clinics, have got all sorts of other things on the side. And the GP's practice becomes just part of what they're doing because they love doing it. So again, it's the skill set. It's what you do with the students. Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, I'm intrigued with what you're doing, because all the things you're talking about is the things that I sort of experience myself within the educational system. For instance, kids don't really read anymore. They don't write anymore. They use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. But my concern is the critical thinking. How do you go about the critical thinking and the idea of generating the right questions? Because I think that is where it starts. Even within entrepreneurship, I think there's a whole lot of things we could talk about. Cash flow, for instance, is a huge problem. Marketing is a huge problem. General business management is a huge problem, But if you don't know how to ask the right questions, how do you go about that?
So, the thinking is so good. Because your thinking is so good. Why? Because one of the first things we did, and I talk about it, and I talk about it in the book, is when I started Centennial Schools in 2022, we were talking about AI. We were talking about the fifth industrial revolution coming. And the whole thinking on the design of Centennial Schools was for that fifth industrial revolution. The current education system, by the way, is based on the first industrial revolution. Okay, so we're on the fifth industrial revolution, and I mean, I'm serious about that. The current education system was designed on the first industrial revolution. So I don't want to give you a history lesson on that now, but so we designed Centennial Schools with the fifth industrial revolution in mind, and when artificial intelligence hit us, we all remember when OpenAI launched ChatGPT. This was incredible. What most schools did is try to shut it down. What most schools did. And what we did is we said, no, we're going to tackle this differently. You're not going to get rid of it. And I always compare it to when in education in the early 90s, maths started using calculators, okay? And we moved away from logbooks and that, Prof, you'll remember those, right? I'm not sure how many of your students will remember those, but I was a JP boy, so I had logbooks and I had all these books that we were looking at tables and everything. And suddenly we moved away from that and we brought in a calculator. Now your traditional maths teachers were, this is unacceptable. The kids, their brains are going to rot. They can't think anymore. Actually, what it did is it took mathematics to a totally different level that the logbook could no longer deal with. And so it accelerated learning of maths. Now, the challenge with artificial intelligence, especially in education, is you have to know how to use it. And it's not going to go away because it literally is in absolutely everything we do. So as human beings, we have to decide where we want to get involved with it, how we want it to, how much we want to use it. But for most parts, it's going to be in our everyday lives. We're not going to get rid of it. So the simple explanation from Centennial School side was, we're going to teach you this is not copy and paste. Okay? And copy and paste, you're not going to get away with that. So we started using artificial intelligence where students could use it as part of their research, but they still had to go and cite where the sources come from. They still had to investigate where those sources come from. They still then had to, we changed the assessment as opposed to just handing it in. You handed in now, it was more work for the teachers, but you hand in your work. You now need to defend it. So suddenly, if I've just given you a paragraph, and I've given you, oh, this is the paragraph, this is amazing. The French Revolution was a spontaneous uprising. And I've given my arguments. Okay, I'm going to ask you 3 questions on that. And I'll fire away 3 questions. The student has to defend their work. So a simple example like that. And what you start seeing is students start using it differently because the critical thinking has to come in. The types of questions you start asking them. The group work there, the collaborative work is so important on that because students start designing the prompts that they're going to put in for whatever model they're deciding to use. What was incredible for me was our students are, and I'm talking in the high school, sort of 14, 15-year-olds, are at a level that you cannot comprehend in terms of the use of artificial intelligence. It is absolutely frightening. And for the poor teacher, it's a massive task. So the easy part is get rid of it, let's not use it, but the difficult part is use it. We have a whole month allocated now in August, which the entire month is designed about dovetailing the different subjects with artificial intelligence being used, the teachers obviously facilitating the process, but it's and the projects or the work that the students are going to be researching, yes, it's curriculum aligned to a large extent, but it's facilitated by the teachers working with the students, bringing in the different skill sets that you obviously want them to learn.
Yeah, Shaun, it's very interesting. This topic I could go on for days. Yesterday, I've been in a conversation at Future Innovation Lab at UWC. And what was interesting is they have designed a model now for AI readiness, and it's coming to education, and maybe in future we could talk about it, and you want to be part of the pilot in the research of this model, and it shows you the type of AI skills you require if you want to move forward. So yeah. There's so much happening, and I've heard a little bird telling me yesterday that it is ciphering through to government and the education department so that we could start deploying it, so that's a very good start. And that brings me by the question, how are we going to change this? We sit with this ancient colonial type of educational system where you have tick marks and crosses if it's wrong, where fail is experienced as something horrible and not as what I used to tell the students, first attempt in learning. How are we going to change this? How do you see that for the future?
Prof, we are. It's tragic actually, because I'll give you a very simple example. Matrics now are getting ready for prelims generally in August, September, or August. They're going to write their prelims. Then they're going to write their finals in November, finish early, mid-October, November, finish early December. The tragedy behind it is we benchmark 12 years of education on one exam. That's the first tragedy. The second part is, say to those students, I want you to write the exact same exam in January, on the 19th of January, when you get your matric results. And guaranteed, total random statistics, so this has never been tested, but I'm guessing probably 60 to 70% of students would reduce their results by 50%. Because if not more. So because what we've done is we've literally gone back to rote learning. Literally, there's some skills involved, but we've literally gone back to rote learning. So we kind of all know the problem. It's why it's a no-brainer. How do we fix that? I think what needs to happen, one, we need to depoliticize education. Without a doubt, it needs to be depoliticized. History, my subject, is now, just to talk to Prof Janssen, has just been completely politicized. If you think history was politicized in the past, it's now even more politicized. What should be happening is students with teachers should be selecting modules of what we're finding that's interest, what skill set are we going to get behind this, what is relevant, and so it's depoliticize education, bring in people, and I think relook at what do we want to produce, go to the end result. What do we want 18-year-olds to leave school with? What skills do we want them to leave with? Now, one of the biggest skills I think we need, and it goes to I think it speaks to the model that you were talking about at the University of Western Cape, AI fluency is a critical subject that needs to be introduced. It has to be. But the problem is we don't have the flexibility within our system to introduce it properly. So you might have some schools dabbling with it, some schools after school clubs or whatever it is. So AI fluency is critical. The other part is languages. So yes, English, but what in terms of language, and that relates to reading. And you're 100% right with your task of getting people to read more. It's one of the biggest challenges that we have. When we go through, we physically have books. So as much as our school is a high-tech space, the students physically have to have books which they will read. And when it's on a laptop, it goes into immersive reader. That's it. You can't be distracted with anything else. So we're encouraging reading as much as possible as well. But the curriculum needs to be redesigned around that end result of what type of student do we want entering the world when they leave school and they've turned 18 and they've left matric. And I think that's how it needs to be built.
Yeah. I've often thought, and I've seen it with entrepreneurship, that we are inclined to overload people with information, with subject matter. We want them to know everything about cash flow or everything about marketing or branding. And we give them theories, like we do in an MBA or something. And somehow it doesn't land within a context. They don't need all this stuff we are giving them. So my solution to the problem would be only give a person what he or she needs at a specific time. And maybe in the educational system, we need to focus on very much a specific type, like some countries are doing it. If you want to do agriculture, have an agricultural line. if
Yeah.
you want to do design, have a design line, something very specific, all about what your passion is. There's some subject at school I really hate, and I never saw the purpose of it. Today maybe I could see why I did it. I didn't think at the time when I had German as a subject that in South Africa I would, but now I work in in Europe, so German is an important subject for me. But I just think that we're not flexible enough in terms of our education and application. We need education in practice. Like entrepreneurship is business in practice. They once asked me to be a professor in entrepreneurship, and I said no. I don't think an entrepreneur could be a professor. You need to be in grassroots level so that you could listen what the needs of people are, and we are not focusing on the needs. Another topic I would like us just to chat a little bit on is branding, because it's one of my pet topics. How did you come about the brand? At what stage? And what's your thoughts about brand? And what is your intention to scale what you're doing now?
So, brand. So the one thing I say, you'll see this when you read that marketing chapter, Prof. I loved marketing. I just loved it. When I was doing my MBA, it was the one section I absolutely loved, and it's just been a natural for me. So, becoming a founder of an organization. So there's a couple of things. One, Centennial Schools is disrupting the education sector. So we all know disruptors. That's tough, because you're not just opening a normal school where we have a uniform, we come to school, we follow the curriculum, we do the sport. That's not what we do. Okay, so that I understood up front. So we had to create a brand that really made people remember what we're about. So one of the first things that we did was do the research around what are the most popular colors in schools. And of course, you can all imagine blue, different shades of blue. There you go. Dark blue, navy blue, light blue. Blue's a big one. Black's a big one. Red, green, wonderful one. Even browns, they came up. But no one had purple. So boom, we're a purple school. So if you look at our website, you'll see the purple says very strong. Okay, so purple became the dominant color within the brand in terms of how we started creating the CI, together with yellow. So that just pops out, and a light, almost a teal blue. So immediately when you start seeing the brand, it looks amazing. And what we did is we then said, okay, let's go through a couple of school websites and think of your top schools. Okay, your top schools in the country. I don't want to name them because you guys might have completely different schools that you think are amazing. They are so boring. So they've got everyone, most of them, the boys' schools, all have everyone in a big huddle, and it's at a rugby game, and we're all huddling, and this is Gees, and the manna are together, and this is it. And for me, it speaks to male toxicity. It's not about, that's not education. That's an aspect of it. Remember, I was a JP boy. So I went through this. I played first team rugby. I went through this. That was not about creating the brand of Centennial Schools. What we wanted was when people looked at it, it just shouted at them, this school is different. Wow, hang on. What is this about? We then got rid of the uniform. Now, in South Africa, that was a massive thing. I remember in the early years, when in 2021 and 2022, when I was still enrolling students, and parents were like, you clearly have no discipline at your school. I'm like, why? Well, you don't have a uniform. Well, first of all, we got rid of the uniform because in South Africa, the only reason we have it is because we were an ex-British colony. That's why we have a uniform, because all the ex-British colonies around the world, Australia, New Zealand, Kenya, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, you name it, have uniforms, school uniforms. They inherited it from the British colonial system. It had nothing to do with an individual's personality or their discipline. And I still challenged one father the one day, and I said to him, so you're not comfortable. You're obviously very much a monastic, a boys' school man. And I see that, because he was quite aggressive in the interview. And I said to him, so your son, when your son's not in his uniform and he's on the weekend, it must be a nightmare for you at home. He's clearly drinking, he's probably doing drugs, he's watching the wrong things on the internet. I mean, it must be a nightmare. He says, absolutely not. I said, but he's in civvies. He's not in a school uniform. So he must be a complete nightmare. Anyway, the mom and the boy got the message. They loved it. The dad didn't like the comparison, but he understood what I was trying to say. So again, we had to then build this really funky school with creative colors that popped out, with a new thinking of no uniform, but discipline, because we speak to a value system. And the value system is what you teach your kids at home. You can't do whatever you want. Here's a code of conduct. This is how we talk to each other. This is how we engage. What's incredible, and I would, any of your students, if you're in Joburg and you've got a gap, by all means, please reach out. I will take you around and show you the school. You're going to walk past, the students greet you. They're friendly. They're, morning, sir, morning, ma'am. How are you? They engage. It's not this indoctrinated jump to attention. Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. It's not that at all. So even the brand, when you start talking about the brand, there's this friendliness behind us. It creates a safety for kids coming to visit, or parents coming to visit the school. It just feels like a safe, happy place. That's critical. So what was so important was in designing the brand, was making it so unique to every other school. Because I can promise you, Hilton College is no different to Michael House, is no different to Bishops, is no different to Kearsley, is no different to St. John's. They're all the same. The uniforms are different, the buildings are different. The rest of it is much the same. So it was quite easy to design a different school, because all the schools are generally the same. And so what I started doing was bringing past students on board who knew me very well from my years as principal and teacher and coach and everything. And they knew how I was thinking and what I expected. And they were involved in marketing. They were involved in digital marketing, in PR. And so we started putting this together. But this was with people who had an investment in my vision and understood who I was. And they started helping me put it together. I think the most critical thing I could say as a founder of an organization, and I speak about this in the book, you have to hang on to the brand as long as you can. Because the moment you hand it over to someone, it loses that passion and that vision. It doesn't matter who you hand it over to, it loses it. So especially when you've got a young organization that you're starting with, that you're disrupting the industry that you're in, you have to hang on to that brand as long as you can. Yes, bring people on board. My marketing media team, we've got external consultants who are brought on board all the time. Along the way, we challenge each other, we question each other, but they know that we always say your blood has to be purple. So Centennial Schools, your blood has to be purple. And if you get that right, you start building a successful brand. Where we knew we'd done something right, on our social media, on TikTok, for example, we put together a marketing team of students. I said to you, and this is part of our entrepreneurship. So you join the marketing team, and we teach them digital marketing. We teach them about filming. We teach them about content creation and that. And so we put different stories together. So if you've got TikTok, go and have a look at centennial.schools. And we have, I think currently, I haven't checked the latest numbers, but we have close to 220,000 followers for one school.
Sure.
For one school. There's no school in the world that has 220,000 followers. Our top video has got 10 million views. And these are designed by kids. What was so exciting for me, and if this is recorded, please send it to my friends at Advitech. They were like, what is happening there at Centennial Schools? Right, we're going to copy this. We're going to start TikTok at our schools. The problem is they gave it to the marketing department. our TikTok is driven by the kids. Yes, we oversee it, we manage it to make sure it's obviously aligned to the school, etc. But they gave it to the marketing department. Their top video suddenly hit 10,000. We hit 10 million. Their followers, 3,000 followers. We have 220,000 followers and growing. So the marketing part and starting the brand really, I think for us, worked very well. And many people will still go, oh, I've never heard of Centennial Schools. Well, probably at this point, maybe. Many people know us as the TikTok school. Many people know us as that tech school. So there are different reasons for knowing Centennial Schools. The last point that you mentioned about scaling up, and this is this dichotomy I sit with, because I went through that corporate system where the corporate buys out or the venture capital buy out the entrepreneurial business. And now we're going to scale it. And we're going to open one in Cape Town, one in Durban, one over here. And for me, the tragedy of that is you dilute that. You dilute the brand. You dilute that initial kind of business model. And it changes it completely. So what has been incredible, from going to starting a business with literally my pension, cashing in my pension and grabbing 2 or 3 really amazing investors, to now telling venture capitalists, corporates, we're not interested in that. Because at the moment, for me, it was critical. We have to get the model right. So Centennial Schools, Sunninghill and Sandton, we've got to get the model right. Once we get it right, because we've now just opened, we bought the property next door. We're now going to roll out grade R from next year, because when we opened with grade 7, 8, and 9, and then went to matric. We now have to open grade R. Why are we opening a prep? Because kids coming to us in grade 7 and 8, foundational gaps are massive. So we've redesigned the whole foundation phase, grade R, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. Are they going to be taught? Amazing. Why? And someone asked a question about, did we adopt it from the Finnish model? What I would have loved to adopt was every single foundation phase teacher in Finland has a master's degree minimum. Master's degree. We're not going to. Okay. But what we can get is we put two teachers in one class. And I'm not talking assistant. An assistant teacher has a matric certificate and is really good with kids. I'm talking about you qualified with a degree in first prize. Secondly, there's 2 of you that are going to be teaching the class. So now, with 2 teachers, you're again changing the whole pedagogy of how you're teaching those foundation phase kids, with a concept that by the time they leave grade 3 to go into intermediate in grade 4, you've closed all the gaps, because we have a full-time occupational therapist, we have a full-time speech, we have a educational psychologist. So you fix any of the learning barriers early on, and you then have confident kids going out into intermediate and eventually middle school and to senior school. So the scalability, if we try to do it now, Prof, it won't work. Why? Because I haven't got it right yet. Remember, education, this massive thing, you've got to shift. It's like I don't want to say the Titanic. Let's give another, some other shift, but it just shifts so slowly. So not only are you doing that, but you've got to get this entire model right. And so I think in the high school, we've got it right. Foundation phase into the prep school, we're going to get that right. And I think once we've got that right, my view is that we would I would rather look to step aside, bring in a really dynamic young managing director who can take it to that level, and almost like when Steve Jobs stood down. There's all comments about whether it went to the next level, but I would rather do that, stay as chairman of the board, and then just see the model grow from there. But we have to get it right first.
Yeah, we could talk a whole day about this topic. I want to talk a lot about the business model. I've recently read an article from the Harvard Business School, research they've done on why entrepreneurs fail, and they said three sort of reasons, and all three reasons is because of it looks as if the business is going well, but one of the reasons was validating the business model, and and growing too fast.
Yeah.
And those are typical problems. But Shaun, I think if you're back in South Africa, we could have a chat, and I think you need to come and visit me in Cape Town so that we can discuss
Yeah.
this, because I think the future of schools, you cannot do education without technology.
Yeah.
I am so sure, and even robotics in future is going to play a very important role. We need ways of taking away the administration schlep from teachers, and I don't know how we're going to do it, but I've got this feel that our education model is too expensive. Even our universities are too expensive. We've got these huge structures, and what we're doing, we are facilitating our positions within these structures, and we're not solving the problem.
Yeah.
Very, my remark about universities would be very soon universities would be in museums because it's not
Yeah.
accessible, and for that matter, private schools too.
I mean, what's interesting to make a comment on that, philosophically, I was adamant that. So remember, Centennial Schools was based on a cashed-in pension and three investors. That was it. There was no government funding. There was no state funding. There was none of that. So this was 100% entrepreneurial and had to be sustainable. So that's one comment. But besides that, what was critical for me was the fees that we charge. So at Centennial Schools, the teachers I've sourced, which I've handpicked every single one, come from your top fee-paying schools, of which we've mentioned along the way, the different schools. So your top fee-paying schools, where parents are paying 16, 17, 18,000 Rand a month. Our school fee, 10,500 Rand a month. But same teachers that your kids going to the school. And so we've also designed the venue. So how can we do that? We were just clever about it. We took 30 kids into one class. First thing parents do is have a heart attack. Oh my God, 30 kids in a class. My child's never going to get attention, because the private schools sell you 20, 25 in a class. Your child gets more attention. Rubbish. Why? Because they haven't changed the pedagogy. Once I've taught, what do? Kids work. I sit at my desk. I do online shopping. I do some WhatsApp. I do some emails. I do some marketing. Where's the personal attention? Our teachers consistently walking around. The kids have their work digitally. It's prepared 8 weeks in advance. So any student can go in history, Mr. Fuchs's class. What am I doing? 3 weeks time, period 3, Thursday, click. The entire lesson is there for my students. Everything. PowerPoint, introduction, concepts, activities. Every single thing I'm going to teach my students, they have for every single subject, from grade 4 right through to matric. So you're empowering, remember, the master student, apprentice student. So what was critical, we took that, and by doing that and by just being clever, we were able to reduce the school fee so that we could get Centennial Schools out to as many parents as possible. The wonderful news, when I say this with absolute humility, my school's full. My school is full. At Advitech, they would give anything to have a school after year 3. We were full. Unbelievable.
How many kids?
500 at the moment, but that's with the high school. But obviously, we're now opening the primary school. So at capacity, the school will sit at just short of 1,000 students.
Yeah. Shaun, it seems to me our time is up, and I'm so sorry about it. It was a beautiful conversation about your book, and hopefully we could have a chat later on again when you're back from Greece.
Yeah. Yes.
But it is, I still wanted us to talk about leadership, but maybe
Another
next time around, we can do that. And yeah, congratulations with your achievement and the passion you have for education. I think you need a passion. these days, because what teachers go through in government schools are really not
and private schools, Prof. It's ruthless, and it's hard. And the parents of today are not the parents of 10, 15, 20 years ago, completely different. Just what I want to mention, when you talk about Cape Town, on the 11th, sorry, I beg your pardon, the 10th, Monday the 10th of August, my Cape Town book launch is happening at Bishop's Old Boys. It's on the Bishop's campus. I can't wait to have it on their campus and talk about a modern school and everything. And my publisher, who's a Bishop's Old Boys, begged me, said, please do not humiliate them. I said, I would never do that. But it's on Monday the 10th. So any of the students who are in Cape Town, by all means, please you reach out to me via the website through our, I see, was that Shirley posted it onto the group chat. By all means, it'll come through to me if you just put it to my attention. And we're at from 11 a.m. on the 10th of August at Bishop's Old Boys. We're having the book launch there.
Right. Aren't you going to stay a few days longer?
No, I've got too much sunburn. It's too hot here. It's like 34 degrees. It's insane. We're flying back on the weekend, so I can't wait to get home. I love South Africa. I love home. I'm looking forward to a little bit of cold.
And are you staying longer in Cape Town? Because I would love to introduce you to the guys at UWC.
Yeah, so Prof, you and I, let's connect. I've got some time in Cape Town. I travel to Cape Town quite a bit as well, so that would be wonderful.
Okay, we've got a whole group working on the whole idea of rather dumping theory, developing skills in schools, and we're looking at models to get that going.
Wonderful. Awesome. Good work on that. Well done.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support and for your suggestion. I think this was a great sort of session. We will let you know what the next book is going to be. Maybe Shaun could write the next one.
Sure. Yeah, we'll do it. I'll just use AI. That's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, well, I've got a doctorate student who wrote a book, and the author of the book is his name plus Grok.
Yeah, Grok is quite dodgy. That's Elon Musk's, eh? That's quite dodgy. But yeah, listen, to the students, hang in there. It's I honestly, the value from my MBA was generally not the theory. No disrespect there, but it was that networking, it was the thinking, it was the skill set that went behind it. And for me, at that point in time, I honestly think BSN was probably the most progressive of the MBAs. I looked at WITS, I looked at UCT, I looked at a number of them. I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. So good luck to everyone if you're doing your dissertation, wherever you are in your journey on your MBA. Well done.
Right. So, Shaun, thank you very much. Holly, thank you very much.
All the best.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot, Shaun. That was great.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Prof. Thank you, Shaun. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Prof, I will connect you with Shaun. I'll send you his email and phone number.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, see you soon. Bye.